Hey, what's going on? It's Quinn David Furness. Welcome to my show. Quinn David Furness presents the Beantown podcast for Sunday, December 29th, 2019, the last podcast of 2019. What's going on? How are you? My name's Quinn, and this is my show. Well, we're coming to you live from the West Coast in the middle of Oregon. The state, the 44th state, 1927. This one it entered the Union. West Coast time. Its capital is Salem, famous for the Salem witch trials back in the 19th century. And we're coming to you with our second of two episodes from out here on the West Coast. If you caught or if you didn't catch the interview that we did last week, you're going to want to put a pause on this episode, go back and listen to that one. Mom goes to prison. It was a shocking, raw, emotional, very, very tiring, very trying interview with my mom, Jane Dennison Furness, about her time that she spent in the Slammer, the Deer Ridge State Penitentiary, something like that, famous for where they filmed Shawshank Redemption. And Mom, who is a big fan of that work, was able hopefully to use that as some inspiration for surviving her time behind bars. But thanks to Mom for coming on the podcast last week and granting us that exclusive interview. That was the first time she's spoken out since being released, and it was very exciting for her, I hope, to be able to tell her story. So if you haven't listened to that yet, go ahead, pause it right here, and go over and listen to that one. I'll be here when you're back. Well, welcome back to the Beantown podcast for Sunday, December 29th. It is the end of the year, and next year will officially be our last episode of year 2. It's always a little strange because we started the podcast, I think our first ever episode was January 13th of 2018. So the final episode of a year ends up happening on the first episode of the new calendar year. So although this is the last episode of 2019, the first episode of 2020 will actually be the finale of Season 2 of Beantown, and Season 3 will be launching 2 weeks from today. That's the plan, at least. So you might be thinking, hey, Quinn, 2 years. This is episode, what are we looking at? 104, I think. 103, 104, something like that. I think it's 104 is this one. Plus, what do we have? 7 or 8 specials, something like that. You might be thinking, well, Quinn, that's a lot of content. What else do you have up your sleeve? How are you going to keep this thing new? How are you going to keep this thing fresh? Well, we'll talk a little bit more about some of our big exciting things that we have coming up in 2020 on our State of the Podcast. We'll do a second annual State of the Podcast speech. That happens sometime in January, I think. We tried to line it up with the President's State of the Union speech. I don't know if impeachment affects that in any way. We'll do some research. We'll get back to you. That you're going to have a lot of the great old things that you love about Beantown to look forward to in 2020, and you also have some fresh new things. I think so. So some of the old things that you have to look forward to, at least things that are coming up sooner rather than later. As always, we'll be joined by our Oscars extraordinaire, Ryan Austin English, who will be coming on the show for the third time, specifically to discuss the Oscars. He's been on a couple more times beyond that. He's probably up to 5 or 6 times total. And he was on our show, our Home for the Holiday special 2 weeks ago. You can go listen to that. But he'll be coming on earlier than usual in 2020 because the Oscars are earlier than usual. The Oscars are something like February 9th or something along those lines, right after the Super Bowl. So we're literally only 6 weeks away from that, 5 or 6 weeks. So we will need to get that scheduled. The Oscar nominations haven't even been released yet. I don't understand why the timeline is so short this year, but we'll do our best to navigate. Some people have asked, hey, Quinn, are you going to do another Oscars monologue this year? That hasn't been decided. I don't think the Oscars currently have a host. I don't know if they're getting a host. No one's called me. A lot of things are up in the air, so it's TBD in that situation. We'll also have our tax specialist, Matthew Fiedler, coming on the show for the third straight year to help us do our taxes. It's going to be fun because we have 2 different state taxes to file this year, and Matthew has been unbreakable in years past in terms of, trying to throw fancy terminology and obscure forms at him, thinking, one of these days we're going to catch him by surprise, but he is always on top of his game. So we're going to have some new tricks up our sleeves for Matthew this year. We'll see if he can handle the heat. It's like Hot Ones, but less exciting. Those are some old things that you have to look forward to again in year 3, including the Pledge Drive fundraiser. Our 3rd annual Pledge Drive fundraiser will be happening in February after the Oscars special. Of course, the entire month of February is our Pledge Drive fundraiser month. That's very exciting. And then we'll also have our annual telethon show where we field live calls on the air from our listeners, from our supporters. I have not done the math. I haven't released what the number is going to be for this year. Last year was right around $200. I wouldn't expect anything more than that. If anything, it might be a little bit less than that for our Pledge Drive fundraiser this year because we raised way more money than what we were anticipating last year, so we have some funds left over. That being said, we will continue with our donor incentive packages that we started last year. We might even try to simplify things this year. It might be a little bit more expensive for me, but I think it's going to be a lot better for you all. So look out for an announcement on those donor tier incentive blocks as we get closer to February, our Pledge Drive fundraiser month. That's some of the old stuff. Our new stuff, very exciting as well. Music has been something that's been thrown around here and there on the podcast. Music has kind of an interesting place on this podcast originally, with a big part of the show's philosophy being low budget. Music was seen as something that was, unnecessary. We didn't want to get too big, blow up, go viral too fast. So we said, let's just hold it on the music. Eventually, the fans kept saying, Quinn, you need intro music. You got to have something fun. So as kind of a tongue-in-cheek thing, I started playing songs to open the show that were not very good. But it's not, that was not the only time we've had music. We've done a concert series on the Beantown podcast with Matthew Fiedler. When I was sick, that was a bumpy ride, to say the least. So music has been interesting. You might be thinking, Quinn, what does this have to do with year 3 of the podcast? Well, I'm going to record a couple of songs on the piano while I'm here at my parents' house with access to a piano. And we're going to try doing some little bit more production value in year 3 here, right? Show the investors that we're growing, we're taking steps forward. We're going to be adding, hopefully, some intro music and some outro music here. It's going to be completely recorded by yours truly. The songs are not original, and they're completely instrumental, but I think you're going to like them. So look out for that. We should be able to get that started potentially as soon as next week. The plan is to go record that stuff right after this. So wish us luck. Another big thing, and arguably the biggest thing that has happened to the podcast since we started video. So it's been what did we say? Around 110 plus episodes and specials. Only a couple of them have been recorded on video. In fact, I think only the specials have been recorded on video, a couple of the specials. We are in talks of acquiring a very high-tech camera with, 5G network and 4,000K speeds and all that stuff. It's going to take a little bit more work, but I think it's going to be a lot better experience for you all, the fans. So this doesn't mean that anything is going away. You'll still be able to listen to us on all your favorite podcast platforms. But now, whereas the current YouTube state of the podcast is just the audio with a slideshow of one picture, the hope now is we get some video going, and that will potentially build up some extra lore with the podcast. We talk about things like the Craig's couch. We talk about things like the flower chair. We talk about the TV guides all the time, but you don't, as fans, as listeners, as #friends of the podcast, you don't get to see those. So we're hoping to add that in. Maybe I'll have a different hairstyle every week. I don't know. There's a lot of opportunities for aggressive expansion there, to use a Batman term. Having some problems with my voice here. Having this weird thing just today, and this happens all the time, but not frequently, where you kind of get like I don't know exactly what it is. It's kind of like a snot bubble, but it's way in the back of your throat, and swallowing doesn't really seem to clear it, unless you get some water or something. That usually helps, but you got to try to do one of these. And that actually worked, right? As weird as that sounds, then you swallow a bunch of snot. So that's fun. But I was having one of those. I had one earlier, and it got to the point where I could barely even talk. I had to do some of that. Wow. Some fascinating sound effects here on the podcast. Anyways, those are the two big things that we're looking forward to in the new year. Some intro, outro music recorded by yours truly, and then adding the video element. Now, that's something where you're going to have to really bear with us. The technical elements, we already mentioned this on this show, a big part of the show's mission, the show's philosophy as we started nearly 2 years ago, was to be as low production value, low budget as possible. Because, and you might think, well, Quinn, that doesn't necessarily make you any different. That's true. But what you don't see is a podcast that's super low budget, super low production value that goes on and on and on. You think after 5-10 episodes, wow, this guy really sucks. Who would keep listening to his stuff? And for the creator, aka me, you think, wow, this stuff really sucks. Why would he continue to create this stuff? Well, joke's on you all, because I haven't missed a week, and we're about to start our 3rd year. So that's the power of the podcast. And so you're probably thinking, well, what's really the inspiration for this? If you're wondering if it's purely spite, you might be right. That's kind of a big part of how the podcast was formed in the first place, spite, and proving the haters wrong, the doubters, etc. And you might think, for some people, that kind of dries up after a week or two. You kind of lose the passion, lose the spark. Not for us. Beantown is the greatest creative outlet that I've ever experienced, and it leads to so many things, right? BeantownPodcast.com includes Beantown blog. That's a whole new medium of content that you're not going to get anywhere else. You'll get a little taste of it from some of my Facebook posts, but you really can't find those, essay length commentaries anywhere else. That's all stuff that goes right from my head right onto the page, and it doesn't get talked about anywhere else. So that's been an exciting thing for us in 2019. Other things like even projects in the works that we haven't started yet, like Beantown Gives Back, our charitable sort of wing of the Beantown podcast. Look for more information on that in 2020 as we get going. So there's a lot going on here, and people I've talked to, close friends, I've shared with them some of the struggles I've had with the podcast in year 2, and, lack of inspiration, lack of motivation, all that stuff. But at the end of the day, no final decisions have been made on whether or not we're going to have any format changes in 2020 in terms of the episode structure, posting structure, that sort of stuff. But one thing I refuse to do is kind of give up momentum. Even if not every episode every week is a home run, maybe it's just one episode a year, that's good. That's kind of a chance you have to take, because speaking from personal experience on podcasts that I've hosted in the past, other podcasts besides the Beantown podcast, and podcasts from close friends that I follow closely, once you start to lose some of that passion, lose some of that inspiration, and once you kind of get flaky with your posting structure, all of a sudden you don't miss it as much, your fans, your followers don't miss it as much, and you just kind of fade away. And to me, losing the podcast itself is not the big concern. It's losing the creative outlet. So we want to be able to keep that going. It's a whole big social media experience, not just social media, but a kind of a content experience that you're getting from the podcast, the blog, the Instagram page at q.queend, the Twitter at BeantownCast or at White Buns, a little bit more vibrant content there, the Facebook page, Quinn David Furness, right? It all kind of comes together, and the passion kind of feeds, or the creative passion kind of feeds off of itself. So you don't want to lose that. If you take out one weak link, the whole chain has the potential to fall apart. So and that's really, that's a big reason why, take Snapchat, for example. I use Snapchat about a fifth as much as I did, when I was in college. But the thing with Snapchat is, they're really, by itself, in terms of how it's structured, the content, the medium, that sort of thing, there's really no need for me to have a Snapchat right now. And I've thought many, many times about dumping it. But here's the thing. I have friends in life who are really only on Snapchat, right? They're not on Instagram. They're not on Facebook. And sure, you can always text these people, but right, there are so many things that a picture just does a better job of conveying, and it's easier to send messages, aka pictures, to multiple people at one time via Snapchat. So that's the reason I keep it around. It's not because there's anything about Snapchat that I think is special, but because there are certain friends I have who I really like talking to, and really the only way to consistently talk to them, communicate with them, is through this medium, which is why I keep that going. What I'm saying to you all, what the point of this is don't give up on Beantown as we go into year 3, because if Beantown dies, the chain gets weak, and Quinn dies, metaphorically. So hashtag save our podcast. And with that long digression and kind of ultimate tangent there, we're going to get to some ads here. Thanks to Mom last week for helping us out with that ad read. This is exciting. For the second week in a row, we're doing a little home field advantage here for Home Pride Oregon. Let's jump right into it. Are you tired of selling your house for less than a quarter of what it's worth, all because you couldn't find a reliable home inspector in time? Well, Oregon listeners, and we know you're out there because I'm podcasting live from your state, there's good news. Home Pride Inspection Services in Bend, Oregon is Central Oregon's hottest new home inspection provider, with inspection services including things like heating and cooling, roofing, plumbing, and so much more. Home Pride Oregon is both contractor certified and home inspection certified, so you know you're getting the good stuff. If you're tired of big real estate's stranglehold on the home inspection market and you want a safe, certified home inspector that you can trust, you gotta call Steve at 541-410-0316, or you can visit homeprideoregon.com. That's 541-410-0316, or just visit homeprideoregon.com on your smartphone or your tablet or your iPad or your MacBook or your Dell or other places. Home pride organ inspection perfection. A quick shout out to the Samson Q2U series that pulled double duty for us last week, as it's been doing for over a year and a half at this point. It sounded crisp. It sounded clean. You know how it goes. When God speaks, he uses a Samson. You know, one of the first times ever, in fact, I believe it was the first time ever that we used a dual action Samson Q2U series microphone for the Beantown podcast was the infamous lost episode between me and my former lady, Erica. That episode has never been aired. It lives on my computer, and no one has ever listened to it, myself included. I think about it sometimes. I talk about it sometimes here on the podcast, but usually it's a situation where you just think about it for 30 seconds and then it fades away and you think about it again a month later. Well, I've been thinking about it a little bit more and more lately, and I'm considering, if there is want from the fan base, releasing the episode to kick off 2020. Let us know in the comments or email us beantownpodcast@yahoo.com or tweet at us at whitebuns or at beantowncast, whatever you want to do, or slide into the DMs on Instagram at q.queend. Let us know what your thoughts are on that. It's not like this shining beacon of entertainment or like the holy grail that's, it's something you never knew you needed. It's a bad episode. There's a reason why we cut it and re-recorded. The only time in 2 years of Beantown podcast history that's happened where we just completely trash an episode and start it all over again. Let us know. Something else I thought of here before we finish the ads. I am now in possession of Scott Farrell's autobiography, Tales, Tears, and Triumphs of the Stage, I think is what it's called. And as promised, we are going to have the audiobook going. That is going to have nothing to do with our regular posting schedule. We're still going to be posting normal podcast episodes per week. But our 8th or 9th Beantown Podcast Unplugged special will be the audiobook of Scott Farrell's book. It's going to take a lot of time, both for you to listen to, but even more so for me to record. And we're not talking about, a couple hours here, a couple hours there. We're talking about days worth of recording for me. Obviously, I'm not going to sit down and just record for a day, but that's kind of the timeline that we're looking at here. So I don't have a good sense of when that is going to come out yet. I haven't done any tests. I probably will right after we finish recording here, which will be fairly soon. I don't have much more I want to add to the show. But look out for that. I'm hopeful sometime in the spring that comes out. But it's a project of mine that I've committed myself to, and we're just going to see how it goes. In fact, what would be great for the second half of this show is for me to whip out that book, because it's right over here as I get up out of these bunk beds, which there's about, a meter, maybe less, in between the bottom bunk and the top bunk. It just makes things challenging when you are trying to navigate. It was a lot easier when I was 5 years old and all of 3 feet tall. A little bit more challenging right now. So what we're going to do after I finish with the ad reads here is I'm going to read the first page or so of the book, and then the classic thinking would say, well, read a page and multiply the time by however many pages there are. Easy peasy, right? Well, The bigger problem with that is that this book has page numbers that stop after like 50 pages. I don't know why. I don't work in publishing. I don't know if it ran out of ink or what the strategy was on that, but it makes this whole multiplication business a little bit more challenging. So what I'm going to try to do is Google this book, see if they're, like, if you go to the publisher's website, it's not even, he doesn't even have a publisher, it's self-published on lulu.com. See if there's a way to see how many pages there are, because it's really challenging without it, just to see. Oh, there. Okay, so the table of contents has page numbers. The chapters themselves, where they start, don't have numbers, so that's really not that helpful, frankly. But I can get a sense that there are chapter 15, which is the last chapter, starts around or at page 449. And let's just trying to see, how many pages to add after that. It's really hard, man. We're just flipping through this book with no page numbers. Is that the chapter beginning? I don't know. Nothing is labeled very well here. I don't understand this book at all. Man, this is going to take a long time to read. Popping the Porn Cherry? That's the title? Oh, man. Okay. We didn't give a listener discretion is advised take on this episode. Oh, there's chapter 14. If you're happy and you know it. We didn't, but this is going to need, this book is going to need a listener discretion is advised warning. I tell you what, man, because we're going to get pretty NSFW. Wow. This one page just, there's like 5 sentences on the page just in the middle of it, but it's the end of the chat. Oh, that's weird. Okay, there's chapter 15. I found it. And I'd say there's another 30 pages at the end of that. So we're looking at really riveting last three minutes of podcast here. Looking at pretty much exactly 500 pages. So what I'm going to do is read paperback, 510 pages. There it is. I'm going to read this final ad, then read 1 page of Scott Farrell's autobiography, and then we'll do the multiplication live on air, and we'll go from there. And that's all I gotta say for this episode. Bob and weave. We all know the hairstyle, and we all love it. But how many Chicago-based independent barbers can actually give it to you the way you deserve? Enter Cuts by Q. It's like Enter Sandman, but just a little different. Cuts by Q has been independently owned and operated since 1995, and is probably one of the better barbershop operations serving Chicago, Cook County, and the greater Chicagoland area. For beehives to bangs, faux hawks to flat tops, and everything in between, call Cuts by Q at 815-298-7200, or you can email cutsbyq@yahoo.com. Again, that's cuts, Q-U-T-Z, by Q at yahoo.com. Oh, when you need a fresh do, something that's snappy and new, just call the experts at Cuts by Q. That's that. Okay, so last bit of business here. What I'm going to do is read the introduction page. This will also, maybe give you a taste. If you like what you hear, or maybe you just like this soothing voice and you want many, many more hours of it. Here is the introduction to Scott Farrell's biography, or Triumph, Tears, and Tales of the Stage. Copyright 2018. So let me get my timer out here. And, boy, this is exciting stuff. I can hardly wait. Okay. Wait. Stopwatch. All right, let's go. I first got the idea of writing my biography in January of 2014. I had recently read a biography of a gay youth who made a name for himself as a dancer, and I thought that my crazy life story might make entertaining and informative reading. My sincere hope with the publication of this rather large volume is that readers will find my story to be relatable, that they may glean from it whatever they may and find ways to apply it to their own lives. This biography is the result of 4 years of entry and editing. This book is primarily about two things: my music career and how I got to where I am today, as well as a few side jobs, and a struggle to find my identity in a community that did not accept who I am. Some names have been changed to protect myself from repercussions of litigious people who mayn't, M-A-Y-N'-T, like seeing their actions or words in print for the whole world to see. To them I say, you should have behaved better, and you wouldn't have ended up as a character in my book. Wow. And there are plenty underlined of colorful people in my story. Allow me to state here that I do not intend a revenge book, but to share my life story, both the good and the bad. The stories contained herein are entirely true to the best of my memory, and some events are a matter of history or public record. One can't have opinions about history even if one disagrees with its telling. I want to start this story on a positive note. No one's life is easy. Struggles happen. Things don't turn out like we want sometimes. Friends come and go, and there's no such thing as security. But life is also really good sometimes. Getting what we want, exploring new things and new ways of life, learning to like oneself, and falling in love. It makes us human. There will be times throughout this story when you love me, times you'll hate me, when you'll cry with me, when you'll rejoice with me. By doing so, we share a human experience, and I think my adventures are worthy of retelling. That wasn't too profound a statement. I'll be profound and insightful later on, I promise. I hope you enjoy reading my story, Scott. That's a page. Now, if you're doing the math at home, that was 1 minute, 55 seconds, also known as 115 seconds. So, 115 times 500 is 57,500 seconds. We divide that by 60. We get 958 minutes. We divide that by 60. We're looking at just a hair under 16 hours. So that is what we're dealing with here, and that's the first time I've ever done that math. That's the first time I've ever read the introduction page. So we're looking at 16 hours of time. And the actual time spent recording and actual time they're recording should be almost identical. I don't plan on redoing any sections. So 16 hours, there it is. That's the mark. 2/3 of a day. And that's if I'm able to read at that speed consistently. I think, half an hour here, half an hour there. That's about 30 to 35 different sessions of half an hour each. I think we're looking at 3 or 4 months is what I could potentially pull off. Might mean a little bit less sleep here and there, but I think we can handle it, and I'm excited. So look out for that. It'll be here before you know it. Don't expect it next week because it's not happening. But that is the introduction to Scott Farrell's biography, or Triumph, Tears, and Tales of the Stage. And if you're wondering, hey, who is this guy? I'll give you the whole backstory in a coming podcast episode, but you don't have to worry about it right now. This guy is a little out there. So that's what I have for you in today's show. Came in right around 33 minutes, about where we finished last week. I think it's a nice, healthy length. Next year is going to be our full in-depth review of year 2 of the podcast. If you're wondering, hey, are we going to get another 4-hour episode with cool jingles in between? Absolutely not. We did that last year on a little 3-day weekend trip to West Virginia. You remember it, frozen pizza on the frying pan, and we did a podcast live outside next to a river, which was really cool. The whole editing process on that is manageable. It takes a long time, but it's manageable. But here's the real problem. My Mac is just, it's been over a year since we did the Christmas Day live stream and the surgery on the laptop. She's still running okay, but the speed just isn't there, especially when you're using an application like GarageBand. And frankly, I know I could pull off a year or two special recap. I just don't have the time right now. So we're not doing a big old project. We'll just have a regular podcast or regular length where we dive into some of the highlights. But it'll be fun nonetheless, and maybe a little bit more digestible for you all the fans. So look out for that. That's all I got for you. It's raining outside. Perfect Christmas weather. So we're going to maybe go get a little bit of fresh air after I record some music. Look out for some of that new stuff next week, and we'll be back next week to wrap up year 2 of Quinn David Furness Presents the Beantown Podcast, and we'll get you ready for year 3. How do you like the sound of that? All right, take care, everybody. Safe travels. We'll talk to you next time.